Story 1. I got to live out my fantasy of being the only man roaming around, pretending I was the last man on Earth. I was on a 2-week furlough until I went back to work. I was the only person in the city center, riding to the train station. I was the only person at the train station. I walked from one end of a 10-carriage train to the other, with no one else on board. Then, I was the only man on my route from the train station to work. It was also nice to see nothing in the sky other than nature. Story 2. I actually quite enjoyed the lockdown. Going for a walk without the constant threat of being run down by cars was great. I suppose it was not so great for extroverts. Story 3. Made me more aware of how unsanitary the average person is, especially when I consider how many people were throwing a fit and acting like the government was telling them to kill themselves, all because they were asked to start washing their hands after going to the bathroom. Story 4. When the pandemic hit, I was on the verge of buying a car I really wanted. Once everything shut down and prices began to soar, I just kept saving. Years later, I saved enough to get my dream car. Story 5. I got paid 3/4 of my weekly pay to sit around and play video games. It is the closest I will ever become to being a full-time gamer. Also, going for a walk was more peaceful 99% of the time, which was awesome. Story 6. My marriage did not survive. The separation and divorce have been a blessing. I finally left my unconventional church and religion and am enjoying life free from invented rules by imaginary gods and their fabricated holy books. Story 7. My then-girlfriend, very new in the relationship, moved into my house after 6 dates. I didn't want her to be stranded where she was living due to lockdowns and have to worry about water, natural gas, power, or septic tank issues. I have been married to the love of my life for almost 2 years now, and we have never looked back. Story 8. Got laid off at age 63 and a half from a job that was destroying my sanity because it was so boring, and I struggled all day, every day to look busy. I spent every nice day kayaking or hiking. I ended up losing 35 pounds in a couple of months. Cutting back to almost no alcohol helped. When my father's health started declining in September of that year, I was able to take him to every doctor appointment along with emergency room visits and made sure he was eating. I saved my 2 siblings from having to take time off from their jobs. When he died 3 months later, I took care of settling the estate quickly, did most of the work cleaning out the house so we could sell it quickly with 0 improvements to a family member. When I needed hip replacement surgery, I was able to enjoy the luxury of not stressing over going back to work and never missed a physical therapy appointment. Story 9. My children were born in 2018 and 2020. I was able to spend much more time with my little ones than I normally would. I cherish that time. It was a gift to me while it was a challenge for many others. Story 10. I got married to my favorite person on the entire planet. We were the last courthouse wedding before my city closed the doors. Story 11. Realizing that the news and people I trusted to lead were dishonest and did not care about me or anyone else was the biggest wake-up call. We are on our own, and nobody is going to help us, even if we are on their side. Even with disasters, politics always come first, not safety, honesty, love, or anything positive at all. Story 12. Final university exams were online and open book. Completely saved my degree. I went from a 2.2 to a first in that final year, as I learned the content even better and felt much more confident being able to refer to study notes throughout. I am not as good at memorizing the techniques to solve engineering and programming questions, so I made a comprehensive pack of notes and step-by-step guides for almost every question type that could come up. This was just before large language models started becoming widespread, so I actually did the work myself. It was a shame to miss the last year of being on campus, though. I drifted apart from everyone I knew on my course and do not have any friends from university anymore. But it is okay. Story 13. My daughter and I are able to work remotely most of the week and spend more time together. I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so I am better equipped to handle fatherhood and work. Story 14. I was terminated, received 2 months of severance pay, and was rehired in less than a month. Essentially, I received 2 months' salary without working. Story 15. The pandemic signaled the beginning of the end of my marriage, But it also meant that my work hours were adjusted and my children were off school. So I got to spend lots of extra time with them, which I loved and I am extremely grateful for. Story 16. I absolutely loved the pandemic. I am an introvert and everything was canceled. My teenagers were stuck at home, so it was just like when they were young. Games, pizza, and movie nights. We went on 2 walks a day and went to the beach once a week. It was awesome. Story 17. I completed many home improvement projects. I installed a beautiful stone path from the driveway to the deck and backyard. Story 18. 3 great things. I achieved a technical accomplishment at work that I would not have had time for if we had not had to cancel all our events. I found the determination to lose 32 pounds and get into great shape. My daughter moved back home after living on the opposite coast for 2 years. Story 19. Being able to work from home allowed me to spend every day with my beloved dog, who passed away unexpectedly at the age of 3 shortly thereafter. Story 20. I met and started dating my wife during the pandemic. Everything was closed, so we would just take my boat to the river and float for hours. We got married last year. Story 21. Both my husband and I were able to keep our jobs and work from home. The best part is that we moved back home to be closer to our families in 2021. Story 22. It convinced me my marriage was at an end. The outcome for me was a new relationship I could not have dreamed of. Story 23. I have never been happier than I was during quarantine. My mental health was impeccable beyond description. Story 24. COVID-19 prompted the removal of all toll booths on the Interstate 95 tunnels, as well as the Interstate 695 bridge. It is all electronic toll collection and video tolling now. The technology has been in place for a long time. I am glad that those toll booths are no longer slowing traffic down. Story 25. Introversion. I used to be that extrovert who could not be alone for more than 12 hours, but now I am like this. I have been around people for 12 minutes. Okay, goodbye. Story 26. I ended up leaving the relationship I entered and was 10 times happier afterward. Being stuck together caused issues, and things just got worse. Story 27. I continued to work and received the stimulus checks. I was in panic mode and spent absolutely nothing I didn't have to. This helped me quickly save $7,000 during the first half of 2020. I put a nice down payment on a car. It is almost paid off now. Once things opened back up, I started traveling to Chicago, Atlanta, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Orlando, Las Vegas, Milwaukee, Nashville, and New Orleans. It has been fantastic. COVID-19 made my adult life far more enjoyable than I expected before the shutdown. It is interesting how money is the key to happiness. Story 28. I was hospitalized in December 2020 and had to stay home from college for the foreseeable future. I was trying to figure out how I would finish my schooling when every school had to go remote. With a slightly reduced course load, I was able to graduate without many issues. Story 29. I became friends with many amazing people and had a relationship where I fell in love more deeply than ever before. Story 30. The world understands the importance of business continuity planning. My career has thrived since. Story 31. I have worked from home since March 2020. I am peaceful, content, and very productive. I find myself working longer hours and do not resent it. There are no office politics, no commute, no lunch or parking costs, and no need for new clothes. I miss seeing colleagues a little, but I have worked since 1979, so I do not care much about seeing people in a work environment. I love it. Story 32. I had time to think about my identity without the stress of everyday life, and I realized I am gay. Now, 5 years later, I am living my true authentic self. Story 33. I was laid off. Unemployment benefits provided more money than I had ever seen, so I paid off the money I owed for school and finished my bachelor's degree. This allowed me to finally leave the restaurant industry and get a relaxed work-from-home job, as I had always wanted. I have never been at a job as long as my current one, and it has completely changed my life for the better. Story 34. I became a mother the day before the true lockdown. I only had my husband with me for the first 3 months of my son's life, including when I gave birth. It was terrifying, but I am glad I was able to heal and rest, and our son got a great start with both of his parents at home. Story 35. I was made for times like those. I could not get out of work, of course, since I am a caregiver, but once I got home, I needed no excuses to stay home, cozy and calm. It allowed me to come to terms with the fact that I am an introvert who had been going against my own nature rather than saying no. I was in for the night. I became able to do what sounded good, rather than be out a lot with people who really did not belong in my life. Story 36. I enjoyed my time during the pandemic, but my life is pretty much the same as it was before, so I guess the memories remain. Story 37. I was able to get my home and self-licensed to provide childcare much faster than I would have otherwise. There were also many grants available. Story 38. Perfecting my coffee-making skills. My company closed for a short period during the pandemic, so I started making coffee at home twice a day and got to sit outside and enjoy it. I tried many types of coffee using different brewing methods and recipes. It was great. Story 39. I lost 35 pounds. I have since gained 20 pounds back because once the pandemic ended, I lost a close friend and 2 dogs to cancer within a year. The strange thing is I never stopped working. I clean a medical tool manufacturing plant, so I was always considered essential. It was easier to lose the weight when the only activities I could do were hiking and walking. Story 40. We got married during it and were lucky with the housing market, upgrading houses. The house we bought is already worth much more than we paid for it. I feel guilty for coming out of the pandemic in a better place than I entered it. Story 41. Met my wife, a travel nurse. We traveled the country for years, staying somewhere for 3 to 12 months at a time. Could not be happier. Story 42. I got a lot of time for myself, such as exercising, stretching, and learning yoga. I also learned some gymnastics tricks but have now forgotten them after the pandemic. I developed my makeup skills, art skills, crafting skills, and maybe improved my English too. I became interested in baking but am still not good enough to make pastries. I became closer with my friends, played many games I always wanted to try, and became good at Minecraft, I guess. I had quality time with my family since, before the pandemic, my parents were always busy at work, my sister was far away at college, and I was also busy with school. I finished watching my YouTube watch list and discovered new channels that I still watch today. Basically, since I had time during the pandemic, I explored activities that could be done at home with the time and supplies I had. Story 43. Working from home allowed me to move states and afford to buy a house, which was not possible in the state I was living in at the time. Now that I work from home, I am in a better place mentally, physically, and financially, and my quality of life has improved beyond measure. Story 44. Because I was not a dependent of my parents, the stimulus checks went directly to me, my parents each received their own, and I was able to purchase music equipment. I spread out purchases as upgrades to my studio setup. I went through 6 upgrades, which normally would have taken me 2 to 5 years, within a year and a half. Also, not for me but for my parents, because they had spare time and my dad was fully retired, they looked into Veterans Affairs benefits. Through a combination of determination, stubbornness, and many doctor's appointments, it was determined that my father was 100% disabled in the eyes of the United States government and Veterans Affairs. He was awarded benefits accordingly, including 2 back pay checks over $10,000 each, allowing them to get things they needed like a snowblower, lawnmower, and new furniture. Story 45. Patients' families stopped coming and telling us how we should exercise with the patients in a rehabilitation center. But it is over now. Story 46. Got a new job and saved a large amount of money. The pandemic worked out well for me, which is remarkable considering how uncertain things were during the first 6 months. I knew I would be made redundant sooner or later. If I had not found a new job, I could have lost a £20,000 deposit on a property purchase, and my wife would not have been able to renew her visa. Story 47. I know it was hard for many people, but I had probably the best year. I moved home to live with my parents after relocating to a big city across the water. I spent a lot of time with them, which I really treasure. I saw my family, including siblings and nieces and nephews, More that year than I ever will again, living where I do and working the job I do in film. It was great. Story 48. Spending a lot of quality time with my dog during the last few years of his life was invaluable. That may sound unimportant to some, but for me, it was the best personal outcome of the lockdown. Story 49. As someone with a disability, I appreciate that curbside pickup is more common now. It makes it much easier to have someone else do the shopping and then place it in my car for me. Story 50. We bought a house with the stimulus money they were giving. We saved it all, plus our tax refund, and used it as a down payment. Story 51. I learned how to cook my food. E-commerce surge refers to the increase in online shopping. Do-it-yourself culture includes activities like gardening. Story 52. I was able to take college classes from home, reducing my college costs by about half. I was also allowed to turn any class to pass/fail, so I could effectively remove any bad grades I received. Story 53. I had a lot of time home alone to pick up hobbies that I would not have had time for otherwise. Even though the pandemic is over, I still play the bass, which I started doing regularly during the pandemic. Story 54. I met some of my best friends, gained social confidence, recovered from severe social anxiety, and discovered my autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Story 55. A 10-year battle with depression has ended. Overcoming it coincided with the start of the pandemic. The pandemic was actually a freer time for me than ever before in my life. No physical prison could compare to the mental one I lived in for years. Story 56. So much. Got promoted, started school, moved to a great neighborhood, became debt-free, worked extensively on my health, was a bridesmaid in a wedding. Probably missing some things, but I can't complain. Story 57. I met my husband. If it had not been for coronavirus disease 2019, we never would have met. He is American and I am Canadian. He is the reason I am still here and much happier. Story 58. I taught myself how to cook. Granted, I would be pretty tired myself sometimes. I would put on my headphones and go. Story 59. Learned some new skills and ran every day for lunch. I was in excellent marathon shape by the end of the lockdowns. Story 60. I have my amazing daughter. Data shows that the pandemic slightly skewed gender birth rates, with more girls being born than usual. I love my child regardless of gender, but I think the coronavirus disease may have contributed to us conceiving a girl, especially because I had the coronavirus disease 2 weeks before we conceived. Story 61. I started an online business just before the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic began. It grew rapidly with everyone stuck at home all day. I quit my day job and am making more money now than I ever expected before. Story 62. I worked very hard, extra hours at a pharmacy while working my professional job from home. I saved so much money that I am in a great place financially now. Story 63. I began to study my career and now have a degree. The fact that I had to wear a face mask helped me buy items in stores, as I was more introverted and had severe social anxiety. Story 64. Rationalizing my alcohol consumption. Suppressing the usual social occurrences of excess for some months and drastically reducing use as I was mainly home alone. I noticed a slight improvement in general health and energy. Since then, my alcohol use is much more reasonable, less regular, and more enjoyable. Maybe the pandemic just made me old. Story 65. A passion for native plant and tree gardening. We cut down a dozen sweet gum trees in 2018. In 2020, early in the shutdown, I planted 20 native or zone native trees. Every single one of them lived. I had never gardened before. Since then, we have added staked native understory bushes and now have a variety of birds, squirrels, and chipmunks. Before, we only saw squirrels and crows. Story 66. I didn't have to fight people who did not want them to come over after I had my first 2 Earthside children in October 2020 and January 2022. By the time I had my 3rd Earthside baby in October 2023, I had already gained enough backbone to stick to my boundaries, so it was not much of an issue then, thankfully. Story 67. Watching humanity further decay and knowing the wildlife will survive and thrive when humanity is removed. Story 68. I started to really focus on self-care and me time. I began better skincare and ate healthier foods that support the immune system. I made it part of my routine and still do. Before, I never took care of my body, did not have a skincare routine, barely brushed my hair, and did not really think about what I consumed. I also got a puppy, and she is my best friend. Story 69. Before COVID-19, my employer had a strict no-home office rule. It was 100% in-office work. Now we have a rule to be in the office 2 days a week. I would not want to go back to the previous arrangement. Story 70. Home pottery studio also gained more space due to a COVID-19 related divorce. A win-win situation. Story 71. Force people to finally learn Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Skype, or just how to better utilize written communication and reduce unnecessary meetings. Story 72. Confirmed that my relationship was as strong as I thought it was, and that we would not get tired of each other. Story 73. It was such a pleasure to walk around with no crowds or cars, and I reconnected with someone I loved. Story 74. Working at home is awesome, as others have said. It only became viable because we were forced. I took up some home projects during the pandemic. I built some really nice bookshelves in the library and study room. I built a deck in the backyard where my wife and I hang out in the hammock. I built a garden to grow my own food in case of emergencies. Every project has made my home cozier and set off a positive chain of events for the family. The first step was me panicking and thinking things were going south or could go south. My faith was shaken, and I took steps to fortify my house that are still in place today. I have water and food for 6 months, and it is actually pretty comforting, even though I will probably never use it. Story 75. I saved money because my library board continued paying us while we were home during illness. Schools provided free milk, and there was less required driving. It was like a paid vacation. Story 76. Some random man in the small beach town where I lived and his long-term girlfriend broke up because of pandemic stresses and not being right for each other. The man and I are now engaged. I would not have met him if I had not left the city during the pandemic, and I count my blessings every day. Story 77. Seeing animals increase their movement range, reclaim areas that suit them well, and observing them up close. So many peaceful, sweet, simple creatures, humans excluded. Generally, getting to spend lots of truly quiet ambient time outside without machines and without people clustering together, disrupting things day after day. Story 78. Research into my medical condition. I developed several intense medical issues after infection many years ago. Research into post-coronavirus disease helps us understand and develop therapies for me. I am deeply sorry others are affected, but the research has helped me, and I am very grateful. Story 79. Working from home, even if it is part-time. I also got pregnant with my youngest, who is now 4. She is awesome, and I would never go back. Story 80. I stopped using heroin, and now I am on 0.4 milligrams of Subutex. I have my life back. I have friends. I am going to see a band I have always wanted to see on Tuesday. I am going to the gym, and life is getting better every day. Story 81. I spent a year hanging out with my dad on his 80-acre ranch. It was probably the most fun year of my life. I just hung out and helped him with projects around the barn, chopping firewood and cooking steaks from a cow he bought from a neighboring ranch. I had not seen him for 6 or 8 years before that, and I have not seen him in the years since. The COVID-19 lockdown was beneficial for me. Story 82. Had time to stop, breathe, and reflect on the direction of my career. I switched gears, changed fields, and got a fully remote job. I got my work-life balance in order. Now I am much better, both financially and mentally. I think I needed the forced break to really take a hard look at my life. Honestly, the pandemic was the best thing to happen to my professional life. Additionally, my kids were really young at the time, 1 and 4 years old, and while sometimes it was challenging, I appreciate the time I got to spend with them throwing rocks in the creek. So many rocks. Story 83. Tons of overtime for 2 years made my paychecks look good enough to buy a house when the interest rates were low. I have a 3.2% interest rate and couldn't be happier. Well, I could, but that would just be when my house is paid off. Story 84. My entire life shifted. I broke up with my abusive ex and lost my mean girlfriends. At the end of 2020, I met my current husband. Felt like a rebirth. Story 85. The trajectory of my life became significantly better during that ordeal. Everything was amazing. Story 86. I got married via Zoom in my backyard. I had to threaten the wedding venue with a lawyer to get my money back. Story 87. My son was a freshman when it happened. He had some issues in the classroom, mainly related to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and not turning in homework that he had completed. During the pandemic, with online classes, he would use one computer issued by the school for the Zoom class and another computer from home for his homework. He would have his homework done by the time class ended and just had to click submit to turn it in. His grades improved significantly, and he developed a study strategy that worked for him and continues to this day in college. Story 88. Showed how people act when governments apply pressure and rules. Successfully contested tickets worth many thousands of dollars. Moved to a different country. Story 89. Flexibility within office time. My job is hybrid, and the culture has really shifted. Many people come in late or leave early, and we are trusted to just finish our work at home. It is really nice. I can have a leisurely morning, get to work a little late, and make up for that time in the evening while I am doing laundry or something. Story 90. I learned cooking and also started a YouTube channel on cooking, though it is currently inactive. However, I have learned a number of recipes. Story 91. Being able to say no more to social plans I do not want to take part in. I am an introvert. I have no desire to go out or socialize every weekend. During the pandemic, it became justifiable to confidently tell someone no, I will not be coming out. Now that is over, that confidence has remained with me. I am a homebody and I am embracing that. Story 92. I had several years with less pneumonia because people wore masks and disinfected public spaces for once. Unfortunately, people seem to have stopped for the most part, so twice a year minimum of pneumonia for me it is. Story 93. I adopted my cat right before. She got to spend much time with her loving human at home after living in a cage for a year. That is it, though. Everything else is undeniably worse. Story 94. All of our bills were paid online, so we had no connection with the outside world for almost 2 years except for the occasional wave from the Walmart or Amazon delivery driver. I preserve a lot of our food, so we did not have to venture out. At the end of those 2 years, my husband and I were closer than we had ever been. We talked about anything that came into our thoughts during that time. I love the time we had and would do it again in a heartbeat. Story 95. I met my husband. We started dating in August of 2020, and we have lived what feels like 20 different lives in the 5 years since then. Story 96. I have worked remotely since then. I made a significant amount of money in the stock market. Friends who believed the COVID narrative and supported vaccines and lockdowns have removed themselves from my life. It is difficult to lose friends, but it was a blessing in disguise. I also worked in a hospital at that time. It really opened my eyes to the corruption. I left that job, found a much better one, and doubled my pay. Story 97. I managed to enter my industry just as the world shut down. Now, it is extremely difficult for junior professionals to find jobs. Mid-level and senior professionals are also having a very hard time securing employment. The job market has been very challenging for some time. Working from home. Story 98. The pandemic was beneficial for me. It gave me time off from a very stressful job and time to just do nothing, which I needed. Story 99. Apparently, some plants and animal species that were endangered made a comeback without human interference. Story 100. I have my entire life because of the pandemic. If it had not happened, I would not be with the most amazing woman I have ever met. We would not have 3 dogs, 2 cats, and 3 fish. We would not own our home or our cars if it were not for it. I have lost friends because of COVID-19, so it is a bittersweet sense of victory. Story 101. Switched careers because of the pandemic. Lost my job managing a cannabis grow operation. After several months unemployed, I landed a job as a machinist. Much better money, benefits, and work environment. I also got away from people I did not enjoy working with. Story 102. Quite a few things. I needed a break from work. I was completely and utterly burned out, worn down to the nub. I was furloughed for about 4 months, and for 2 of those months I was still paid my salary. I needed a lot of time to myself to do absolutely nothing, time to just relax, time to play golf, and time to get back into shape. I reconnected with the love of my life. I took a much-needed vacation driving from Florida to New York, and we spent that time together seeing places we had never seen before. She ended up moving in with me in September 2020, and the rest is history. I got a new job where I work from home. I had wanted a work-from-home job for 20 years by that point. I was so burned out that I was considering retiring about 10 years early, but since working remotely, I feel I can retire 10 years later if I want to. I have a new job now, but it's still work from home, and I still feel the same way. I have never caught coronavirus disease. Story 103. Working from home has been a great experience. My company realized that a job like mine can be done anywhere. I discovered how much I love the comforts of my own home, my computer setup, being with my little dog all the time, and feeling less pressured to act like someone I am not because people are around. I am one of the best employees they have, and I hope they know that. The only issue is that lately my boss seems to prefer the employees who work in the office, almost as if they look down on me, even though they are much less responsive and less skilled than I am. Story 104. I used to suffer from the boss babe, must do it all, self-care is lazy mindset. During the pandemic, I felt like I reset. Doing nothing or just doing something I wanted to do, like a puzzle or reading my book, was not being lazy. I take my nothing planned or scheduled time very seriously now, and it is so necessary for my mental health. Story 105. Discovered you do not need to spend money to have fun. I used to live in a trail-rich area and cannot believe people never used most of it. Plus, the mental and health benefits you get from it. Story 106. Crippling job insecurity with 30 years of experience. One difficult job after another and long breaks in between while looking for work. Story 107. Gained video editing skills, digital drawing skills, learned how to digitize my artwork using vector software. Story 108. I feel nostalgic not for the death toll obviously, but for my life during lockdown. I loved staying at home, having video calls with my friends, going on walks along empty streets, or just hanging out on my balcony. I appreciated the enthusiasm of people trying to make everyone's lives more interesting by coming up with creative ideas. I also love how our daily life has changed. Many people work from home officially. We have delivery services for everything. Social distancing is more accepted. Story 109. Was able to get a brand new Subaru Impreza at 7.9% annual percentage rate with a 620 credit score. $2,000 down and a little over $29,000 total with taxes. Story 110. I had a bad breakdown in Christmas 2019. Staying indoors for a few months gave me the time and space I needed to get better. Story 111. For a short time, there was hand sanitizer and cart wipes everywhere, which I loved. Unfortunately, I cannot find any of that anymore. I do like that, for the most part, I can wear a mask now without people asking if I am a cancer patient. Otherwise, it was all bad. Story 112. The virtual elimination of wasteful and time-consuming travel for business meetings saves a lot of time and money and reduces stress. Most meetings can be handled effectively through video conferencing platforms. Story 113. Tough to choose between my divorce and my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnosis. Both have been positive, and I am grateful to my 5-year-ago self for persisting. Story 114. As difficult and isolated as the whole situation was, one positive thing I observed was that there are genuinely good people who care about others. During that time, many people revealed their true selves, and much of what we saw was hate and selfishness. It was an ugly truth in your face. The beauty of it was that it allowed the genuinely great people who truly care to shine through. There are many of them, and it helped me maintain hope. Story 115. I enjoyed the lockdown and I never could go back to the obligatory social interactions. I enjoy our solitude and letting fewer people into our circles is not something I will give up again. I do not miss the fear and anxiety of having family, friends, and colleagues getting sick though, so all in all, I am glad that is over. Story 116. Dropping the hustle culture and slowing down. Continuing to edit my life and remove things that interfere with my peace and well-being. Story 117. My divorce. I honestly had no idea that my spouse hated and resented me as much as she did and probably never would have known if we had not been stuck in a house together. Story 118. I got married exactly how I wanted to get married, with just myself, my husband, and my best friend as our witness. The pandemic gave us an excuse to not spend tens of thousands of dollars on a wedding just to appease our families. Story 119. Left a job that was taking over my life and got a job that has a much better work-life balance. I make more money than I ever would have at my old job. Story 120. Working from home became common. I have had a hybrid schedule that I have loved since then. Now we are going back to the office every day because of former President Donald Trump. Story 121. Moved to a beautiful house in 2021. I doubt without the pandemic I would have moved. It was a great decision. Story 122. The knowledge that I survived my greatest fear. There were pandemic talks way back in 2009. The idea that the world could shut down was labeled a conspiracy theory, but it still became my greatest fear. By 2018, I had started to relax. It had been 9 years since the seeds of fear were planted. Surely, 9 years was enough time to dismiss my fears as irrational, right? Boy, was I wrong. This lady put a song together about the pandemic potential 13 years ago, and I find this song to be prophetic now. Scared me back then. How did she know? This question haunts me even today. Story 123. My wife and I were looking for houses in March 2020. COVID had not yet hit our state, so things were business as usual. Interest rates were very low at this time, and we got pre-approved at about 3.75%. We looked at one house that was in poor condition and too expensive for what it offered. My wife saw it separately from me and called me during my birthday dinner to say she hated it and was setting up a showing at the dream house. My wife had been eyeing another house that had been on the market for almost 2 years. Its price had dropped from $450,000 to $350,000 recently. It was still out of our budget, so I said no way. However, the realtor convinced her to make an offer, saying the sellers might lower the price. Long story short, we loved the house. As we viewed it, the world was becoming increasingly uncertain. We decided to put in an offer. Our realtor said, "We need to do this now. Let's go to the nearest fast food restaurant and use their Wi-Fi to write the offer." While we were sending the offer to the sellers, my wife received a call that she had been furloughed. The realtor said, "These are unprecedented times. Don't tell the bank unless they ask." The sellers were snowbirds who spent winters in Florida. They were stuck there and desperate to sell the house they had owned for 2 years because they needed money to build a summer home. We offered $300,000 and wrote them a nice letter. They accepted immediately. 2 days later, the bank called and said, "We received word your wife is out of work. The deal cannot go through." While on the phone with the bank, her boss called and said she was deemed essential and could return to work immediately. During the back and forth delaying the closing, interest rates kept dropping, so we locked in below 3%. We thought, wow, that was awesome. And it was, but that was not the end. As things got crazier, interest rates skyrocketed, and houses in our area were being snapped up quickly for cash, no inspections. Our neighbor's house, which was smaller, had less yard, and was not as nice, sold for $450,000 sight unseen. Our realtor called every week saying she had buyers who would pay $500,000 for our house. By pure luck, we bought our out-of-budget dream house within our budget, with an unheard-of interest rate, just weeks before the housing market changed drastically. We remain in touch with the sellers, and the man still reminds me that if he had waited 6 months, he could have gotten his original asking price. Even better, despite my wife being deemed essential and returning to work in childcare, many people chose not to send their children to daycare, so she had no work. Her business still received assistance to pay the staff, so she had a 2-week paid vacation that lined up perfectly with our move-in date. She got paid to pack and move for 2 weeks. Story 124. It revealed the true nature of the people around me. It became easy to see who was willing to endure inconveniences to protect others and who did not care at all about endangering others. My boyfriend at the time hosted 2 house parties with 40 people each. Even though he had over $100,000 in savings, he refused to use it because he was saving to buy a house. That was his choice, but he truly thought he was in the same difficult position as those of us with only $20 in our accounts, uncertain if we would keep our jobs or apartments. It also highlighted political differences, which in that climate were closely linked to differences in basic human values. The people I surround myself with now dropped everything to help the victims of the St. Louis tornado. The people I was around before the pandemic would not have made time for that. Story 125. I am content to stay home. I used to want to go shopping at least 1 day a week. Now I stay home and do my shopping online. Story 126. My therapist called it the big reset button. And I think that's true. I really took stock of what I wanted out of life and changed my life direction completely. I know many others who were stuck at my old dead-end job decided to go back to school or left to pursue what they had always wanted. I also met my husband at an end-of-the-world party in early March 2020 that some distant circle of friends threw. Lockdown gave us a lot of time to get to know each other as friends through texting, phone calls, and more. When we started dating 5 months later, it gave us the opportunity to have experiences that felt like it was just the two of us in the whole world, like going on road trips to beaches, hiking in the mountains, and going to the park to have picnics. All the while, there was literally no one there but us. Story 127. Taught me how to be better prepared for such an occurrence. I now keep a stocked pantry and freezer. Nothing excessive, but I keep ingredients for things such as bread. I freeze meats that can be cooked for meals or used to make gravies, broths, stews, and soups. I also started canning foods like green beans, applesauce, pickles, jams, and jellies. Story 128. My brother and I both bought virtual reality headsets just before the pandemic. We spent more time together that year than we had since we both lived at my parents' house. Story 129. Learned the basics of how to play the stock market. Got lucky enough times to buy an engagement ring in cash. I proposed to my wife in July 2020. We got married in October 2021. Story 130. I quit academia. I realized there was more to life than moving around endlessly chasing the tenure track. Story 131. My son was born the day the lockdowns began. I was able to stay home with him when normally I would have had to work. Story 132. I was still in school at the time. Being home away from my classes full of peers who avoided sitting at the same table as me unless there were no other options, who gave me weird looks when I said completely normal things. I did and still do have friends, just not in all of my classes, made me feel alone most of the time. Having the workload and advanced placement tests content reduced truly saved my life. Spending so much time at home and having time to do anything other than overload my brain with schoolwork gave me the space to start reflecting, accept myself for who I am, and try to be a better, more functional person. Story 133. I improved my cooking skills significantly and left the service industry, which I had wanted for a long time but thought was unlikely to happen. Story 134. I had more time and energy every day without needing to commute to work and back, so I studied for 2 additional professional qualifications. Story 135. Remote court hearings. No more driving for over an hour in the morning traffic to go to the courthouse for an 8:30 a.m. hearing, where my portion is most likely only going to be a few minutes long. Story 136. I got to spend a lot of time with my children, who were 2 and 4 years old when the pandemic started and everything shut down. For the next 2 years, we regularly experienced months of lockdowns, during which I spent most of the week in a forest with them. Bonfires, camp food, s'mores, hammocks, swimming, exploring, and generally having a wonderful time. The pandemic was perhaps the best time of my life as a father, getting to spend so much time with them and making memories almost every day during their most formative years. It was a joy and a privilege. Story 137. It was a perfect time to work out of my fear of open spaces. Before the coronavirus disease, I left the house once a week to sit in my car while someone put groceries in it. As restrictions loosened, everyone wore masks and gave each other plenty of space in public. Now I can come and go from my home whenever I need to. Story 138. I was at school back then, so for 5 months of quarantine, I did not go to school or any extra classes. After about 2 months, I became very bored and started studying advanced physics and Japanese. Both had a significant impact on the direction of my life. Story 139. I was on the verge of a serious, borderline psychosis-level mental breakdown due to non-stop trauma involving relationships, family mental illness, and deaths. It felt like I was holding it at bay, and when we went into lockdown, it was almost like a breath of relief and permission to fall apart and start really processing things. It was an awful time, but it also gave me the serious time and space I needed to come apart, analyze the pieces, and start taking the harder but healthier actions. I am happy and grateful to have made it through with myself and to be getting more and more back every day. It really was a gift. I am still young and saved myself possibly another decade of pain, confusion, and living against myself. Story 140, my dog. We would not have gotten her if not for the pandemic because we would not have had time for a puppy. I was in school and working full-time, but my school changed to online, so I had a lot more free time to raise a puppy. Story 141. Before the pandemic, I thought the reason I was not getting things done was a lack of time. But when I was home for 3 months due to the lockdown, I still did not get anything done. I discovered that the actual problem was that I am lazy. It was good to find that out. Story 142. While people have not become perfect, I genuinely get a sense that everyone is more grateful now that we are able to step outside the house again. There is definitely a different energy that I can sense that was not there before. Does that make sense? Story 143. The widespread adoption of remote work proved to many that employers have no reason to deny it where possible. Unfortunately, many employers are now reversing this policy to maintain control and productivity, or at the direction of political and business leaders. Story 144. Weirdly enough, I fell into a large new group of friends. It was circumstantial. Someone I worked with moved back to the state after initially planning to be a digital nomad, but didn't because of coronavirus disease 2019. I reached out and asked if they wanted to hang out since we were reasonably acquainted. We did, and then they brought me into their friend group. They have been my main social circle since the beginning of 2021. Honestly, if it were not for that, I would be a pretty lonely adult. I am really grateful for that specific series of events. Story 145. Went through all of our family photographs and organized them for our children's benefit. Wrote as much information as I knew on the back of each one, including names, location, date, event, and more. Stored them in bins labeled according to the family tree and specific to each child. Story 146. I thought I was helping save the world with Paycheck Protection Program loans and ended up realizing the bank I worked for was taking advantage of me. I left during 2022 and almost doubled my pay. Story 147. The temporary reprieve from having to pay for commuting and daycare costs allowed me to save enough for a down payment on a home. Thankfully, I bought just before interest rates increased significantly. Story 148. Delivery services. I understand the concerns about cost. Recently, I have been laid up after surgery and a prolonged rehabilitation. DoorDash and Walmart delivery have been invaluable. Story 149. The temporary reprieve from having to pay for commuting and daycare costs allowed me to save enough for a down payment on a home. Thankfully, I bought just before interest rates increased significantly. Story 150. Met my wife in 2020. I was recovering from surgery. She had a week off because she had a minor cold, and we were both bored swiping on Tinder. My surgery was postponed twice due to the coronavirus pandemic. If it had not been delayed, we would not have been in the same place at the same time, so to speak. Story 151. As a musician, my local scene was very competitive and it was hard to book a gig in some venues. COVID-19 completely reshuffled the deck. When places finally started featuring live music again, I found myself getting shows at venues that did not have room for me in their schedules before. Some of those became regular recurring slots as well. Chaos is a ladder. Story 152. My brother had his first son in 2019. It took until 2022 for me to get my mom to move closer so she could spend time with her grandchildren. We were very broke. Stimulus money really helped. Since moving, I have quit smoking, found decent paying work, and reconnected with family. My mother passed away, but I genuinely believe she lived longer because of moving and quitting smoking. Knowing my mother got to be a grandmother for a few years is worth everything. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.